Hello and welcome to the KIMIYA Healing Podcast. On a cozy evening, I'm here cuddled up with Rambo and we're about to drop some truth bombs, aren't we, Rambo? He's falling asleep, but I hope that you guys are wide awake because today I'm going to be talking about a big myth. And the big myth is that men don't need to do womb healing. Huge myth. So, first of all, I'm going to start by saying womb trauma affects every single human being because we've all been born from a womb. We've all been conceived and gone through the birth process. And for many people, that birth process has been traumatic, has been less than ideal, has imprinted on their psyche, their body, their nervous system, their energy field. And a lot of our life force actually is harnessed and directed through that birth process and through our conception dynamics. So the idea that men don't need to do womb healing and don't need to resolve womb trauma because they don't have a uterus, to me, is completely bizarre. And I think it's a real shame that a lot of the womb work that's being offered is not inclusive, actually, of men. So I work with a lot of men who have come to see me fundamentally because of womb trauma. And I want to talk about what that looks like and feels like, and what the journey of womb healing can actually do for men, and how it can really ignite the clarity and energy of the divine masculine within them when they go on that profound healing journey. So the first point of womb trauma is the conception dynamics, and often the clients that I work with have been conceived in less than ideal circumstances, or there has been a lot of fear that's come from one parent, for example, or maybe both parents, or perhaps they were just a complete accident, or they were conceived through rape or through a violent act. Whatever the situation, the energetics of conception are very real and are felt deep in the vibrational landscape and deep in the root space of that person. Although very few people are conscious of it, it can be something that creates deep disturbance in a person and deep unrest, and often is never addressed. Traditional forms of therapy will never really explore the conception dynamics, and as you guys know, we do that in Womb Room and bring light to that. So that's the first stage of conception dynamics, the birth dynamics as well. And if we go slightly further back, we also have the womb imprints from ancestral and collective fields. And as this child is developing in utero, we have all of the fluids that surround the child that are actively imprinting and generating pathways for neurological activity and actually forming this baby's brain. All of the fluid is essentially what the baby is born from. And these fluids rock around, move around, vibrate, and imprint based on ancestral and collective structures, trauma, and unresolved unconscious stuff. So it's very important when a woman is pregnant for her to be deeply still and offered nurturing stillness so that she can be in a healing frame of mind while she is holding her child in her womb. And bear in mind that this is a process of healing. This is an important time for healing to take place. This is a time when a lot of things come up. This is why women often find that they are struggling, deeply struggling psychologically and emotionally during pregnancy. It's a time of huge healing and it often goes by and passes by unfulfilled in that way. The healing opportunity is not taken. It's just seen as just another physical experience. The spiritual realities are completely neglected. So a child that is born already has been influenced by so many factors, not just the neurobiology of the parents, but ancestral imprints, conditioning, and collective factors that affect the womb waters and the energetics of the womb world and that early womb world. And if you want to read more about this, you can visit my blog, where I've written an article about fetal neurological development and whether consciousness exists pre-neurological development and all the factors that actually affect. And I've had clients that have talked about just a knowing, a sense of being in the womb, and already the danger is there, already the fear is there. They're already feeling terrified, and oh, great timing. Huge giant motorbike racing past my house. They're already feeling terrified, but they don't know why. And the terror is imprinted in them, in their brain. And obviously when it comes to therapy, it's really hard to talk about these things because you don't really have a memory if the fear was when you were still developing as a fetus. And I think it's something to really bear in mind, that this work can be done, and womb work incorporates conception and birth dynamics and the healing of that. The second thing is, when it comes to the womb world and all sorts of things that happen to men when they're actually just children and growing up and getting familiar with their genitals, when they're getting activated in their genitals, they're learning what arousal feels like, they're learning what expulsion feels like. These are all sensations that generate information and can also, depending on the environment that a child has grown up in, can also generate a lot of shame. So, for example, I've worked with families where the child has really been struggling to with the potty training because there's been fundamental structural issues in the sacral area that have affected the child's ability to actually pass urine, because they can't feel the sensations, or the sensations are being confused with other types of sensations. So by the time they recognise they need to go to the toilet, it's too late. Now, obviously identifying this is very, very deep work, and it's work that I do, but my point is that it's not resigned to one gender. I've worked with baby boys and young boys who have been through this issue, for example. And again, that's related to their in utero world. It's related to their early development, structurally, somatically, and it's also related to how they then come to perceive their own womb space, their own genitals, their own sexuality, and their own life force. When it's left untreated and it's unresolved, it can lead to so many problems later on in life. And then we go further down, we go into puberty, and again, womb comes in, womb is relevant. Men that are going through puberty face so many challenges and uncertainties and confusions when it comes to understanding what exactly is happening to their body, why they feel the way they feel, why they maybe look different to the way their friends look. It's not just girls who have this big shift. Boys have this big shift, but because perhaps they're not developing physically so outwardly and explicitly like a girl does, often the boys are just left to get on with it. And it's almost seen as, well, just suck it up and get on with it. You know, you're going through puberty. There's nothing major that you have to figure out. I mean, a girl has to, or a young woman has to figure out periods, menstruation. She has to figure out breast development. She has to figure out so much that's going on hormonally. And boys have to do that too. And when that's not supported, it can lead to a lot of shame. It can lead to a lot of body hatred and body disconnection and When young boys are not educated about sexuality and sexual urges and are not taught anything about sex education, quite frankly, or their own body, or how to connect with their own body, what can happen is a trial and error. So you get young boys going through a trial and error process, or trying to figure it out on their own, not getting support, maybe getting educated by other kids at school, or maybe getting misled by other kids at school, and then getting shamed by their parents who don't want to support that process of knowledge, that process of manhood, that process of becoming a man. They don't want to support it because they were never supported in it. That can create a lot of deep shame, and I've lost count of the number of male clients that I've worked with who've talked about how difficult puberty was for them, how confusing it was, how disconnected they felt from their body, how ashamed they felt of because of what was happening in their internal world, and how they felt about their sexual urges, for example. And so much gets shut down. That's what's really, really sad about it. So men are learning from a very young age that they're not supported when it comes to their body, their somatic connection, their sexuality, their emotional expression, their urges, and essentially it gets shut down. So later on down the line, when that man wants to have a relationship and a deep connection with a partner, how can they do that? They haven't cultivated a deep connection with themselves. All of this falls under the work of womb healing, really. And I help clients to go through this journey of reconnecting through the trauma, through what they've been conditioned to hold in their bodies, and actually reconnecting to the essence of their womb and the life force that they can cultivate when they connect with their womb. And it's such a beautiful and powerful process when they start to feel what's possible for them, rather than only feeling this kind of muted disconnection. Well, that's totally irrelevant to me. I'm a man, I don't have a womb. Like a very 2D mindset of masculinity. And it's a very powerful journey that they go on. I also want to talk about sexual trauma, both as a child and as an adult. So womb work is very essential when it comes to uncovering deeper causes of trauma, and sometimes that is sexual trauma, and that sometimes has happened in childhood. It's very important to acknowledge that men have experienced childhood sexual abuse and therefore need to do womb healing. Womb healing is not just for women, and so many men have gone through this confusing and terrifying journey of sexual abuse, whether it was through the hands of their own family, teachers, friends, cousins, uncles, grandparents. I've seen it all in my practice. It's absolutely everyone and everything under the sun that you can imagine. And fundamentally, it leads to a deep disconnect in a man's body, in a man's emotional body, in a man's sexuality, in a man's sense of self, belief in himself, confidence. The terror that is stored there in the womb space and in the root space, it really can only be resolved when somebody does somatic healing and energy-based womb work. That's really when this stuff comes to the surface and gets resolved. Until then, it goes more or less buried, unnoticed. So womb work is essential if a man has experienced sexual trauma at any age, for any length of time. It doesn't matter. The imprint is there, the fear is there, the level of disconnection is there, and it's a purpose, it's serving a purpose. I'll talk about that later on, but to ignore it and think you can just go on through life, somehow being able to experience deep intimacy and flow and life force running through your body and be deeply grounded and still and able to connect with your partner and fulfill them and be fulfilled yourself, especially sexually and emotionally and spiritually, if you're holding womb trauma of any kind, the truth is, it makes it hard or impossible. And if you're listening to this, you might even resonate with that. You might even resonate with the fact that it has been hard for you. It has been many years of struggle. And if you're in that camp, then you want to ask yourself whether you're really ready to do something about it and really ready now to heal yourself. So childhood sexual abuse is a big factor of men holding womb trauma. And another big factor, of course, is adult sexual abuse. And that happens to men as well. I think it's really important to talk about the way that men's bodies are and can be violated during sex by women as well, and also by other men. There's also a more subtle level of womb trauma that men can hold, which is the experience of being intimate with a partner, and actually, instead of it being a loving, fulfilling, mutual connection, actually a lot of trauma is absorbed, a lot of pain is transmitted, a lot of this kind of density is felt, and that can lead to, over time, that can lead to a man shutting down. If you think about it, a man is entering a woman's womb, right? In the case of a heterosexual relationship, he's entering everything that makes her, including her unconscious, including her trauma, including her pain, including what she doesn't want to look at, including all those subtle vibrations of self-disgust, hatred, trauma that she hasn't healed. And he is entering that. If he doesn't know what he's holding, and she doesn't know what she's holding, what you've got there is a recipe for disaster, quite frankly, if it's not seen as a healing opportunity. If both partners want to heal and want to use that as a opportunity for things to come up and for healing to arise and to be emotionally vulnerable during the process, great. But if it's just going to be a mechanical experience, and the man's trying to derive pleasure from that, and he's trying to derive fulfillment and connection, and he's trying to feel his sense of manhood and his sense of clarity and power, and he's trying to feel like a man, and he's entering a womb that is inherently going to reject him, right? It cannot accept him. A traumatized womb cannot accept being entered. That's the truth. So what happens then over time? People are in a relationship where this goes on and on and on, and what I've worked with my clients is that they're feeling disconnected as men from the sexual encounter with their own partners, their own wives, because all of this stuff is buried, it's not being talked about, it's not being held, there's no space for it to be held in until one partner decides to go to therapy and work on it. So gradually he starts to subtly be kind of rejected by her body, and just starts to move away within himself, and starts to maybe feel less of himself as a man, and starts to maybe think, okay, well, maybe this is not something that we need to do if it's not, it's not deeply fulfilling for her, and it's not really deeply fulfilling for me, then maybe we don't do this, right? And all sorts of stories and narratives can be created around that. But essentially it's traumatizing for a man, and I'm just focusing on the man for now because that's the focus of this podcast, but of course it is still traumatizing for a woman. But this is where it becomes important to understand that womb trauma actually affects intimacy. It affects the ability that you have to be deeply intimate and to experience the deeper emotional and spiritual experience of making love, which is a hugely transcendent experience when you're able to access that within yourself, when you feel safe enough within yourself. Otherwise, it's a stress relief, it's a frustration relief, it's a trauma bonding opportunity, it's a unconscious mechanical pleasure seeking game, really, that leaves that leaves you feeling kind of empty. And the longer a guy plays that game, the more confused he becomes about his own manhood, about his own masculine energy. It's really confusing. If the thing that you're supposed to enter, you either cannot enter because of what you're holding within yourself, you feel unworthy of entering the gates of womb, the temple of womb, or when you do enter, it's so full of trauma and pain that she's checking out, and therefore you feel like you're not even able to give what you want to give. Feminine can't receive, and you as a masculine can't give, and therefore the whole polarity is shut down. And it's that polarity that's creating union. So you're not able to experience divine union through the sexual encounter. So when that goes on for a very long time, that leads to fundamental changes in your identity and your relationship. And this is why it's so important for men to take womb healing seriously and not to think womb healing, oh, that's something that women do, right? I don't have a womb. Like, come on. This is a... For those of you who are listening to this, I think you've been in womb room, you've experienced this work. I think you're kind of beyond that frame of thinking. But for so many men, they do think in that way. Like, oh, well, it's a woman's responsibility to do womb work. Now, another situation where womb healing applies to men is really important to take into consideration is where there's a father wound. Not just a mother wound from perhaps, traumatized birth or difficult pregnancy, maybe disconnection when it comes to breastfeeding, all these things that can happen in life, but also the father wound. This is something that it goes under the radar. It's really amazing how people will come in to see me with all sorts of stories about their mothers, all very relevant. But when it comes to the father wound, it's all very quiet. It's all very, it suddenly gets all very solemn and unsure and mysterious and a little bit dark, and the energy kind of changes, and they don't really know whether they can say what they want to say or whether it was really real, because the nature of the father wound is that it's often either so explosive and violent that people don't know what to say, or that it's so subtle, such a subtle chiseling away of connection, of trust between father and child, that clients don't know what to say about that. There wasn't an explicit event, so I don't know what to tell you about my father. Now, the father wound, the absence of a father's presence, the absence of a grounded, still, masculine, all-accepting presence that supports you, guides you, clarifies the path for you, and teaches you what masculinity is. The absence of that and the distortion of that is what keeps men holding such deep fear in their roots. And this does affect their ability to connect, to hold space for women and other men, to hold space for themselves. It affects their ability to deepen in love, because that fundamental fear in their root space pertaining to the masculine line is there vibrating. Undeniably, you can feel it. When there's a severance in the connection, that's even more traumatic, because the lines, the roots that go down into the earth, that go through the paternal line, just are broken, severed, and they need to be rebuilt. And it's very difficult if someone has severed the connection, right? Or if someone never knew who their father was, or if their father left their life and never came back, or if their father was the one that betrayed them so deeply that how could they ever reconnect and feel safe enough to drop their roots in through that energy? How? So these are all the things that I help my clients to work through, and these are very fundamental structural foundations for a person's sense of self. These are also structural foundations when it comes to the body, the sacrum, the lumbar spine, fundamental when it comes to the energy field with the roots and the sacral space. This is very, very important, and a lot of men are not doing this work because they don't know that it's available, for a start. It's very difficult for men who are holding womb trauma to talk about it. Very difficult. Very unlikely that they're going to go to see a therapist, a talking therapist, and want to go week after week and talk, right? It's not really orientated towards resolving deep womb trauma and somatic trauma, right? I think it's a useful place to start when you're at the very early stages of healing, certainly to become trauma aware. But fundamentally, men learn through experience. And that's why ancient initiations and ancient ways of initiating a man into manhood, they're not based on sitting around and reading poetry or talking. They're based on doing. You have to feel it in your own body to be initiated into manhood. Feeling is believing, right? And is so important for a man to have a space where he can do that in at depth and do it in a trauma-informed way, rather than what tends to happen is that this over-reliance on mental processing and cognitive framework starts developing, and a man starts to think he knows himself because he's got all this jargon in his mind psychologically about what happened to him. But actually the body completely disconnected from it, totally disconnected from his own life force. And there's only so long you can go through life thinking that you've resolved stuff because mentally you've talked about it. That doesn't mean you've resolved it through your body. That doesn't mean your nervous system has resolved it. And what happens is, if you look at people who are going down that path, they haven't created anything new. They haven't connected deeper to their soul purpose, to their life's purpose, because you can't if your nervous system is still dysregulated, if you still have fear in your roots, you can't. So for a man to do womb work inherently connects him to his life purpose. And it can be a very beautiful and profound, rapid journey if he wants to do the work and go that deep. And for a man to find and embody his life's purpose, it's such an anchor of masculinity. It's such an anchor of clarity. It's such a truth within him that shines. That is what he's seeking. He doesn't want to sit in his underpants all day and play guitar. I'll be honest with you. He doesn't, as much as he tells you he wants to. That's not his life's purpose. The masculine energy is so incredibly powerful. I cannot even tell you what it's capable of. It is everything. It is everything. It is the space that holds everything that is birthed. That's how powerful it is. So allowing a man to go through that journey of womb trauma healing, to come through deeper in his body, to be reconnected to his life force, to his deep sense of anchored safety, so he can hold that space, so he can hold it within him, so he becomes the space that everything moves through and flows through, and he isn't moved in the process. That's the divine masculine. And if you're listening to this and this sounds completely bizarre and foreign to you, listen to it again and again and again. And take time to sit with what I'm sharing and feel it in your own body. And if you feel very far away from it, make a note of that. Good. Because there's an opportunity there for you to grow. There's no point listening to podcasts and going and not learning anything or not being completely baffled, right? If you're listening to stuff and you're not like trying to rewind and listen to that bit again, you're not learning anything new. You need to move on to more profound material. So if this is all new, good, take it as a good sign. You're obviously listening to this for a reason. So we've talked about a lot. I've talked about a lot. Rambo's listened, and I hope you guys have listened too. Talked about a lot when it comes to masculine womb trauma and the importance of doing womb work for the masculine. how it helps to really create a deeper sense of anchoring, safety, stillness, purpose, and brings forth the divine masculine energy. Now, the final thing I'm going to say about womb work is on that point of union. And when a man has done his work with his womb, when he has conquered the fear in his roots, when he has anchored, grounded and stilled himself, when he has opened his heart and his field and accepted all that he's found within himself and has become the space, everything that he wants is there. Right? Everything is there. He can see it clearly. It's all there. Bowing down to him. That is the nature of the divine masculine energy. That is the birthright, actually, that exists within all men. That everything that is birthed through stillness. And it may sound conceptual until you're living it. When you're living it, it's not conceptual. It's like you're experiencing a miracle every day because everything you need is just there. Easy. And you feel your own innate divinity and power. And you feel why you have chosen the path of masculinity. Why you've chosen the masculine energy to embody in this lifetime. You feel it, you know it, you're respected in it. Right? It's not something you feel you need to suppress or hide, or something you feel you need to shut down or distort. No. You just know what it is. You know who you are. And this is what allows a man to be a safe space. This is what allows a man to be a powerful magnet for divine feminine energy when he's there, ready, present. Not when he's quivering in his root space but trying not to look at it. Right? Not when he's holding unresolved father wound that he doesn't know how to even speak about and therefore shut himself down completely and can't even talk. That is all possible to heal. All of what I'm telling you about can be healed and is a profound, beautiful healing journey. But it starts from the inside. Deeply inside of you. Your fundamental primal nervous system needs to be addressed. And chances are you can't feel it because you're in the identity. You think you are who you are. You're moving the way you're moving. You think this is you. This is life. This is what life is about. This is what I'm capable of. You've programmed yourself because of the sensations and impulses that are going through your body from such a young age that then get interpreted neurologically through your brain, through your stories. You've programmed yourself to believe that this is all there is for you. And the men that come to see me, they get a rude awakening and a beautiful enlightenment that this is not all they are. In fact, that this is the beginning of who they're going to be. And that they are involved in the process of identity recreation. And in the process, they start to create new kingdoms. A man that has healed himself is holding space for creation in a way that is effortless. It's so effortless. And it's so clear. There's no interruption to the stream. It's just total crystal clarity. The direction is clear. The knowing is clear. It's done. It's almost like it's already done. The feminine energy is very different. It goes through these movements and spirals and dances, and it likes to do that. And that's its process of creation. The masculine energy, when it heals, is very different. Once it's done, it's done. It's the most beautiful experience ever, holding the divine masculine space open for a man that is really deeply committed to growth, spiritual growth, expansion, inner development, and being the best person that he can be for himself in the world, for his children, and for his higher purpose, for his higher self. So I hope that you've enjoyed listening to this podcast on the importance of womb healing for men. And that covers womb healing in all aspects, in all areas. We're all touched by womb, and ultimately womb is the world that we create. Womb is the matrix, and womb healing helps a man to be part of a conscious recreation of the world. And that's what positions a man as a leader, not a follower. You can only be a leader when you are consciously recreating yourself from the inside, creating and birthing something completely new and innovative, and therefore contributing to the creation of new paradigms in the world that support people at a deeper level. This is the work. If you're called to this work and you want to deepen your healing or accelerate your healing, please reach out to me. You can also read my blog. I have written articles about masculine womb trauma, what it feels like, what it's like to understand deeply how the masculine rage is often created because of womb trauma, and what womb trauma looks and feels like, similar to what I've talked about in this podcast, how it can be healed, what the divine masculine energy feels like. So have a browse of my blog, read around, and if you feel like you're ready for this type of depth and this level of transformation, then reach out to me. You can contact me via my website, KIMIYAhealing.co.uk. I am actually thinking about getting a .com. I have a .com. I'm thinking about transitioning to a .com. But minor details, not important. You contact me on KIMIYAhealing.co.uk and share this podcast with your sons, with your partners, with your cousins, with the men in your life that you value and that you know are going to be inspired to grow. Right? Share it with them. See what they get from it. And if you're a man and you're listening to this, thank you for being present and attentive, for opening your heart and your mind to something perhaps quite new, maybe quite confronting. And I welcome you to take this journey into womb alchemy and recreate your identity and recreate the world.